What's up, everybody? My name's Big Cam and welcome back to another Comically Boston breakdown episode. And today we are talking about Spider-Noir, starring Nicolas Cage as Spider-Noir, or The Spider. And this is currently streaming on Amazon Prime. It came out back in May, but it dropped all at once. So I was just now, in the first week of July, able to catch up on this series, watch all 8 episodes, and I really don't think that there's any reason why this shouldn't have been able to drop week to week. You know, I think it was really well done. I think the cast was well done. And as far as like the Sony Spider-Man verse, I think I like Spider-Noir far better than Madam Web, Morbius, all 3 of the Venom movies, Craven. I think I like Spider-Noir more than all of those combined, which is really saying something because Venoms aren't that bad. Tom Hardy's pretty good as Venom. Craven was okay. Morbius and Madam Web are lost causes. But like, Nicolas Cage as this character was really well done, and like if they had a movie budget and to do a movie with Spider-Noir, I would totally be here for that, you know. And if not, you know, maybe just a second season with a slightly bigger budget, you know, I would be totally here for that. But even so, with the budget they had, they were able to do so much more than I was expecting, you know, like Tombstone, Sandman, Megawatt, you know, like just crazy the amount of characters that they were able to have and like the amount of powers they were able to use as well as the Spider-Man powers, you know what I mean? It didn't take till the final episode, you know, he didn't suit up as the Spider in episode 8, you know what I mean? Like, it was decently well done, you know? Like, I certainly don't think there's any real problems with it, and other than the fact that it was dropped all at once for the binge watch people, you know? Like, I think there was definitely a story here that could have been an 8-week show, or maybe even like 2 episodes at a time, and you make it 4 weeks, you know, like Amazon really has to play with the release schedule a little bit. I mean, I think The Boys were coming out week to week, so there's no reason they have to drop everything all at once. Maybe take notes from some other shows, maybe do 2 episodes, 2 episodes, 2 episodes, and 2 episodes, or maybe you do the first 3 and then you do week to week after that, or the first 2 and week to week after that. So you know, doesn't have to be 8 weeks of week to week shows if you're not confident in certain episodes not being there. You know, maybe you do 1 and 2 together, and then you do 3 because that was really good, and then you leave 4, and then you do 4 and 5 together, and then you do 6, 7, and 8 by themselves. You know, I don't know. There's definitely ways that they could play with the release schedule, though, that I think that Spider-Noir could have been more successful and just talked about more, you know, like I personally don't know anybody that's watched this show other than myself at this moment. So that's really why I'm making this video. You know, I'm going to talk briefly about what happened in each episode, and we're going to go through and break down the whole first season of Spider-Noir. But really, I'd just like to talk more about Spider-Man Noir with you guys and all the little Nicolas Cage-isms in here. And he just goes full Nicolas Cage at multiple parts in this show. So really, if you're a Spider-Man fan and like you like that world, but you're also a Nicolas Cage fan, this show is just like the perfect mix of that, where like I'm not necessarily somebody that watches a lot of noir shows and black and white and old style stuff, you know, so having this noir show and this detective show that's set in the 30s but then, you know, has the vibe of Spider-Man characters, right? So for me, I'm able to go, oh, that could be Cat Hardy, that could be the Black Cat, that's Robbie Robertson, you know, this is Spider-Man, but it's not Peter Parker, it's Ben Reilly, you know, like, so seeing the different characters, the Silverman, the Tombstone, the Flint Marko, Sandman, you know, like having different characters and having this world, it felt like a whole universe here of the 30s Spider-Man Marvel universe here, and I genuinely want to see more of this 30s New York and more of Nicolas Cage being the Spider. I think he's a riot. And yeah, so might as well jump on into breaking this down, and we'll start with episode 1, titled Step Into My Office. And it starts with Web swinging through New York. That looks a little funky maybe, but it's still a pretty good opening sequence. And it seems that Nicolas Cage's character of Ben Reilly retires the Spider and becomes private investigator Ben Reilly. And, you know, so he's a PI and he's like a detective type of thing, but not a cop. But, you know, after a man named Addison who has fire powers, maybe Molten Man is what he's he's supposed to be or something like that. And we see that Ben's wife, Ruby, is dead, you know, or maybe this was his girlfriend or love that he had before, but she died in a car accident and drowned, and he was unable to save her. And then we see a character by the name Silvermane, played by Brendan Gleeson. And Silvermane is like the big mob boss of this show type of thing. And he is really, really good as Silvermane, and I really love Brendan Gleeson as an actor. But he had his mansion burned down by Addison. But then we pick up with our private investigator, Ben Reilly, as he gets hired to find a guy's wife, and he has to climb up to the penthouse of this building. And as he like gets up to the penthouse of the building, he like sees this woman talking to a man through like the crack in the door, and he could just like stand there and watch, but the guy goes to like slap her, and he webs his hand from like behind, stopping him from hitting her. And it's just like, ooh, and like he gets like pictures of them, and like, you know, he's being like a little private investigator, but like he's almost giving me like Jessica Jones vibes, but set in the 30s, and he's also Spider-Man. So like, I don't know, I really like the vibe of this already. But Ben then goes back to his office, and he's got his little secretary Janet there, and they're like going over the pictures, and she's like, oh, is that the mayor? And they see the guy's reflection in the glass. So he's like, oh my god, like the mayor was gonna hit this woman? And they find out that the woman is Cat Hardy. Black Cat, possibly, but not necessarily in the show. She's just Cat Hardy in the show, and she's a performer, and she sings at the alcove, and she's gorgeous and has a beautiful singing voice. And Ben is infatuated by her singing. He's like sitting there at the bar, like, you know, smoking, drinking, watching her do her thing, and then he like sees that Silvermane is there, and he runs over to like the phone booth and like starts to dial up. And Ben calls Donegal to try and warn him, but we cut over to see that Silvermane has Donegal tied up for information, but you know, he doesn't really know anything and ends up slicing his throat, and tells his guys to bring him the other private Dick, talking about Ben Reilly. We see Ben talk to Cat Hardy, and she has a bodyguard, Flint Marko, Sandman, and he seems like he's going to be a big ape type of guy, and he's just like, you know, big lumbering idiot and just all fists. And he follows Ben and beats him up, but Ben hits him with a 2x4 and sees that Flint Marko has Sandman powers, and he uses his big sandy hands to punch him off a building, but he swings back up, not so gracefully. You know, he hasn't been the Spider in 5 years. But when he uses his webs, it's not just the white normal organic webbing we see. We see he has organic webbing, right? He doesn't have web shooters, or, you know what I mean, like web fluid. But he does have organic webbing that is black. So I was like, ooh, is this like Venom webbing? Or no, just some darker 30s webbing? And as he's like in the middle of, like, he's like beat up and he's tired, but he's fighting Flint Marko, and he like webs his leg, so he slips and hits his head on a big like steel beam and knocks out Flint Marko. And Ben makes it back to his office, and his secretary Janet tries to quit because they're not making money, but Cat Hardy shows up and offers him a job, and that's credits on episode 1. And there's like a trailer for the rest of the season that's great, and I was just like, oh, if this was where the episode 1 ended, sure, it wasn't the strongest episode of the season, but with that trailer teasing what happens to the rest of the season, I was like, this would have been great weekly. I don't know what people are talking about. But that then leads us into episode 2, titled Tread Lightly, and we open episode 2 with Silvermane telling his guy Winston to go find Ben Reilly for him and bring him to him, you know. And Ben is trying to find Flint Marko because he's ran off after their fight in the last episode, and Cat Hardy is like, has feelings for him, but is also like her bodyguard, so she's like looking for him, and she hired Ben to find Flint Marko, and that's kind of what she was hiring him for at the end of the last episode. But we cut over to see Lamorne Morris as Robbie Robertson. He's great as Robbie Robertson. And it seems that he knows that Ben used to be the Spider, but he also was a former reporter at the Bugle and lost his job because in the 5 years that Ben hasn't been Spider-Man, he hasn't been able to write about the Spider and all of his accolades, you know what I mean? So he lost his job and, you know, never asked Ben to be the Spider again, but certainly needs a good story to get back in good favor at the Bugle and become a real official reporter again. But we cut over with Ben going to Flint Marko's place to look for him, and he finds a photograph of a military group, and Flint and Addison were both a part of it. So Flint's got these sand powers, Addison had those fire powers in the first episode that we saw, and, you know, he like burned down Silvermane's mansion or whatnot. But they were both a part of this military group, and Ben's spider sense is like kind of like a migraine, and you can hear it like, you know, really affecting him. And it always like cuts to a close-up shot of like the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. So like this photograph though, in the way that Ben looked at it, I was like, huh, so Ben, Addison, Flint, they all got these powers from this like military photo, and like, you know, this is definitely from like a war of some sorts. You know, I'm not sure which war, but either way, this is set back in the 30s, so definitely wartime. But as Ben is inside Flint Marco's place, Silvermane's guys come looking for him, and Ben has to like hide in the closet and like creaks the floor, so like the guy Winston comes walking over to the closet and he tries to open it, but Ben webbed up the door so like it wouldn't open. And I was just like, ooh, this is a nice little like Spider-Man, like, ooh, hiding in the closet type shit, you know. And like, he is Spider-Man, but he's also being Ben at this moment, you know, like he's not fully the Spider, you know, like this is broad daylight, you know. And I miss shit like this, like little details of like just, oh, he's investigating, oh, he has to hide, oh, but they would have found him, nah, but he can web up the door to keep his identity hidden and stay hidden from these guys so they don't see that he's there, you know. We then cut over to the secretary Janet as she goes to the cops and bribes them with burgers for info on Flint Marco. And I was just like, oh, this little character of Janet, every time she's on screen, I absolutely love her. But Ben goes back to his place, and there's guys waiting for him, and they grab him, put a bag over his head, and take him to Silvermane. But as he's like talking to them, he's like, listen, I don't know anything about what you're trying to bring me to Silvermane. You guys are just trying to kill me. So he like jumps out of a moving vehicle and hides under the bridge, and this was like on the Brooklyn Bridge or something. And I was just like, ah, yeah, see, like he wasn't in a spider suit, but he can just have sticky hands and he just grabs onto the bottom of the Brooklyn Bridge. Why not? You know, that's a good way for him to get away from his guys and just disappear out of nowhere. We then cut over to see Robbie trying to get Ben to put on the suit again, you know, and the city of New York needs Spider, and the Spider, you know, could help again, you know. But Robbie, you know, investigating, tries to look for Addison's widow to, you know, inform her of her husband's death, but also like get more information like, hey, why was he doing this? Who hired him? Type of shit. But as he's looking for Addison's widow, he ends up finding Tombstone. And this is Lonnie Lincoln Tombstone, but he's, you know, just a big, formidable guy. As soon as you see him, you're like, oh, Tombstone's scary. And Robbie, while he's like in this place, he sees like burned hand marks into the pillar. So it's like, oh, this definitely seems like this is where Addison was from, you know? But because Ben rolled out of the car and ran away from Silvermane's guys, they come to his office and wreck the place and hold poor Janet at gunpoint, assholes. Scared poor Janet half to death. And she tells Ben that she's not coming back because she's so scared. And she's like, if you're just going to get me killed and we're not making money, I have to go. You know, and she leaves. And she wants him to bring the spider back. And she's like, it's been 5 years, Ben. You got to move on. You've grieved. You got to get back to being the spider and helping people. You can't just shut yourself, a part of you, out. Like, she goes, I know there's a part of you still in there. And, you know, bring him back or I won't be, you know. So he's got to like get the spider back. But, you know, in that 5 years since he's now not been the spider, Ben moved apartments. So he has to go back to his old apartment where the spider suit is stashed in the wall. And he like is talking to the new owners as if he's like a super in the building and he's like a handyman. And he walks into their bathroom and busts up the wall and pulls out the spider suit. And then like the owners are like, what is going on in there? Is there something wrong with my toilet? You know, they come in and they're like, I don't think that was a handyman. And it looks like he like escaped out the window. And I was just like, oh god, Nicolas Cage is so funny as his character. But Robbie, when he was talking to Tombstone, ended up getting an address from him saying that Mrs. Addison would be staying at some nice hotel. So Robbie goes to Mrs. Addison, and she is staying at a very nice hotel and spending all of the money that Addison was paid to kill Silvermane. And the wife is not all that sad to hear of her husband's death, you know, so definitely a gold-digging hoe. But Lonnie Lincoln friggin' Tombstone went to go find Flint Marco, and he does find him, and, you know, like, kind of, those guys are old buddies, and it seems like they know each other from maybe the war back in the day. And he comes to look at him and goes, we gotta stick together, brother, the two of us, you know, with superpower, things are getting worse. Come with me, we'll stick together. You know, so those two are now gonna be buddies together and gonna go hide out where Tombstone was staying. But we then see Ben as the spider for the first time in 5 years, and the spider attacks Silvermane's convoy in broad daylight. It's just interesting to see some broad daylight Spider-Man action, and like comes in and takes out these cars and the guys in the vehicles and like whips their guns and whatnot. And it's just a good scene with him on like top of these old 30s and 40s vehicles, you know what I mean, like old Model Ts and shit. And his quips as Spider-Man are absolutely hilarious. But then, you know, he beats all these guys and gets in Silvermane's car, and the Spider tells Silvermane to lay off of Riley or he will kill him. And it's like, damn, this 30 Spider-Man is crazy. He carries a gun and will kill, you know, like it straight up threatening killing him, not even being like, I will put you in jail. No, I'll kill you. I'll be back, you know. This is the 30s. This is a different time. And then Ben goes back thinking that he did something good protecting Ben Reilly from Silvermane, but because Ben stopped Silvermane's convoy, he didn't end up going to the docks to this big booze operation, and there was a sting operation, and the cops trying to bust Silvermane with this booze, and it looks like Silvermane wasn't there, so whoever this was that like called in to like sabotage Silvermane was trying to like rat on Silvermane pretty damn hard, and they would have caught him pretty red-handed with guns and booze right in this like Harlem port or something. And you know, Ben's sitting there and he's like looking at a spider. He's like takes off his glove and the spider's crawling on his hand. He's like, oh man, what did I do? And that's credits on episode 2. I was like, yeah, what did you do? You fucking thought you were putting Silvermane in his place trying to protect Ben Reilly, but instead you friggin' cost him from getting arrested at the scene of a crime, you know? So, oh, damn. So then we head into episode 3 titled Double Cross, and Silvermane doesn't leave Ben alone necessarily. Instead, he hires him to find the rat who tipped off the cops. And Ben goes and interrogates the cops from the dock raid, and he finds out that the orders came from the mayor. And as he's like pretending to be an officer talking to these cops in the little hospital, it was hilarious. There's like any of these scenes where like he has to be a detective, but like he can't be Ben Reilly and he's got to pose as somebody else, he absolutely kills all of those scenes. You know, like even when he's like just the Spider or being Ben Reilly but having to like turn the nozzle to 11, you know what I mean, like, and really turn it up and turn those Nicolas Cage's right up into the ceiling. Robbie then goes back to find Lonnie Lincoln because they saw him in the picture of like the war guys, and he was like, oh, I know that guy. Oh, wait, he knew Addison, and he was a part of the same war program that Addison and Flint Marko were, you know. So then Robbie goes back to where he found Lonnie the first time, and as he's there, the cops come raiding in the place, and Lonnie, now, you know, sitting there, he's like, oh my god, stop, stop. He's trying to like defuse the situation with the cops, and they hit him with his batons, and they bring out his superpower and his hardened tombstone skin, and he as Tombstone, and then Sandman comes out, and together they beat up the cops and, you know, kind of get the hell out of there. And Robbie was even going to get beaten by these cops because he's a black guy and he's not where he's supposed to be, you know. So these cops were definitely not doing the right thing, but how did they get this information that these guys were here in the first place? Or maybe these cops were just coming in to like kick these guys out. It did seem like maybe they were in like a homeless encampment type of thing, poor housing, that maybe they weren't supposed to be there and they just kind of made living quarters for themselves. But it was kind of cool to see Sandman and Tombstone kicking ass together like that. I was like, oh wow. And like Robbie's grabbing pictures of it as the cops are going flying and shit. Ben then goes to question Kat to see why she set the meeting with the mayor that night, but really doesn't get anything out of her. But Ben says that he'll keep looking for Flint Marko, but she definitely seems a little suspicious. So then Ben goes back to his office, and Robbie tells Ben about Lonnie and Flint, and Ben thinks Kat is the rat and she's the only one that connects all the pieces, but he needs proof. So Ben suits up as the Spider and he's able to sneak into Silvermane's place and pick his safe, and he gets $1,000 to be able to like bribe the Addison's widow, but the balcony door slams shut from the wind, and like Ben had put a little bit of spider web over the lock on the door so that he would be able to sneak in through the balcony, which obviously no normal person would be able to sneak into Silvermane's penthouse suite through the balcony, you know, unless you can swing webs and crawl your way up there, you know. But so the balcony door slams shut and he wakes up, and Silvermane has a gun and he's like, where was it? Oh, who is he? And he even like checks under his bed thinking that somebody's there, and he was maybe correct because somebody was there, because Ben in the spider suit hides above his bed and he's like on the ceiling. And then I just thought about it. I was like, oh, he's hiding on the ceiling, but now he's got to wait for like Silvermane to go back to sleep and all these guys get out of the room so he can then go out the side door again. Like, fucking, only some stuff Spider-Man could get himself into is just getting stuck on the ceiling and just being like, ah, fuck, how long am I gonna be here? Flint then returns to Kat, and it seems that they are a couple and that they are going to run away together in love. But Flint turns into Sandman, and he's like, you know, hiding his face from her. Like, she's like, why won't you show me? And he's like, this is just a fantasy. We can't do this. I'm a monster. You won't be with me. You'll see this and you'll run away. So he runs out of the room, and she's kind of like, oh, Flint, my love, you know. But so Robbie goes to the Bugle to try to get his story published about this cop raid in Flint and Tombstone taking these guys out. So Robbie, you know, sells this story to the Bugle, but instead of just running the story as Robbie wrote it, the publisher tries to sell the story as, oh, they're monsters and there's monsters on the loose, and they just took Robbie's story and his photos and put his name on it, but, you know, complete lies and not the story at all that Robbie wanted to tell. Ben then calls Kat saying that he needs to speak to her, but he is stopped by two guys on the street that saying the mayor wants to see Ben. So they take him over to the mayor's office, and the mayor asks Ben to get him in touch with the spider. He goes, you know how to get in touch with him. I need to talk to him. Come on. And he's just like, okay, you know, like, it's just funny because, like, Ben is the spider, but nobody thinks he is. So, like, Ben is, like, the connection to the spider, but he is the spider. You know, like, it does come into a problem by the end of the show where you're like, well, if everyone thinks that he's the photographer of the spider and not actually the spider, how do we get Ben, Riley, and the spider in both places at once? And that does actually happen in the finale. But Kat doesn't listen to Ben and doesn't wait for him. And she runs and tries to go to Penn Station to leave and get on a train and go run away with Flint, but she's all by herself trying to run away, and Ben meets her at the station trying to talk to her, but they both get caught there by Silvermane's guy, Winston. So Winston brings them out into the middle of nowhere, and Silvermane has a hole dug for the rat. Winston's definitely trying to sell Kat as this rat, and I think she might actually be the real rat, but because of that $1,000 that the spider stole and then gave to the widow, and then the widow, you know, had this money, he friggin', you know, checks her wallet and goes, this money, I mark all my bills. You know where I mark them for you? Right fucking here. So Silvermane kills Winston thinking he is the rat, but I think this was all just Ben's fucking ploy to save Kat even though she was the rat. So, like, why would he do this? And it's just funny because, like, Silvermane shoots the first guy and then he looks at Ben and goes, you good with a shovel? And Ben's like, why? And Silvermane says, we're gonna need another grave, and fires a second shot, but we don't see who gets shot, and that's credits on episode 3. I was like, just another cliffhanger ending that would have been good for a week-to-week show. I was like, I don't understand why this couldn't have been a week-to-week show, but who did he shoot second? And, like, was it Ben, Kat, Addison's widow? Uh-oh. But that then takes us directly into episode 4, titled A Mistake I'll Never Make Again. And Kat is singing in the club as they are both, like, remembering and flashing back to what Silvermane did last night, shooting Winston. And we see that the second shot was Winston's pal named Geo. And Ben is, like, listening to Kat singing, and he's sitting there talking to Silvermane at the table. And Silvermane offers him a spot on the payroll, and Ben says, I don't like your retirement plan. And Silvermane's like, you got some mouth. That'll get you killed someday. And Ben's like, yeah, I've heard that before. And poor Kat comes over to the table, and Silvermane just kind of just has her under his thumb. Even Ben's trying to leave, but he, like, makes him stay and, like, drink all night. And poor Kat, like, you know, goes, oh, sure, I'll go get the bottle. And she goes to her room and, like, just cries and breaks down. And you're just like, oh, man, poor Kat. She'll never be not stuck under Silvermane's thumb while he's still alive. But so then the next day, Ben comes into work and he's super hungover. And Robbie and Janet are trying to talk to him. And he's like, I need scrambled eggs. You know, like, but Robbie says he's off to Harlem to look for Lonnie, and we see, like, a long shot of Robbie on the train as he, like, just goes through multiple stops to get to Harlem. But then Silvermane asks Kat why she was at the train station, right? And she's like, I was leaving, you were unhinged, you know? And he's like, oh, why would you think I'm leaving? You know, like, his Irish accent is also so good, because it's like a mix of the Irish Brendan Gleeson that we know, and then like New York gangster, and he's just so good at playing this role. Like, I would 100% want to see more Silvermane. I would want to see more Nicolas Cage, the cast with Kat and Tombstone and Flint Marko. Even Robbie's fucking tremendous with Lamorne Morris playing him. I really do love this cast, and they were so enjoyable to watch through every episode. But then Silvermane goes to a meeting with the police chief, but he doesn't show, and this pisses off Silvermane, because, you know, he's like, why don't you find the police chief and remind him all that money I'm paying him means that he has to come to his monthly meetings. You know, and oh, I wouldn't want to piss off the mob boss Silvermane. But Ben then goes and meets with Kat, and it seems that it was her that was trying to kill Silvermane, and she really was the rat the whole time. But Ben saved her, and the reason she was trying to kill Silvermane was because Sandman is her, you know, love. But as she's like telling all this to Ben, and they're like sitting on the stage at her first place that she used to sing, and, you know, she was like telling him the story of like how she ended up with Silvermane, and he showed up one day and tipped her more money than she's ever seen, and then offered her own club. And at first his strings were thin and not very noticeable, and then they came as thick as rope, you know. So like the ropes around her now are from Silvermane are too thick, and she wants out type of shit. So that's why she's been trying to kill him, so that she can run off with her love, Flint Marko. But he would never allow that, you know, Silvermane. But, you know, as she's telling Ben that like she was the rat and she's trying to kill Silvermane, Flint overhears all of this and is pissed. And you're like, uh-oh, friggin' Flint's gonna give her up to Silvermane. That's not gonna end well. But Flint was on the run for a while, you know, and hiding out at various different places and hiding out with Tombstone. And Flint, because now he overheard this conversation, he goes back to Silvermane like the good loyal dog he is. But he doesn't give up Kat as the rat and the true person that's been trying to kill Silvermane, because he truly does love Kat. So, you know, he's loves her, but he is ready to fight for Silvermane, you know. So he is loyal to a fault. So he's like gonna fight for Silvermane. He's on Silvermane's team. But he loves Kat, so he's not going to be a traitor to her. But Robbie Robertson finds Lonnie Lincoln and brings him back to the office, you know, where they can talk and be at a safe place where no one's going to find them. And he's just sitting there playing cards with Janet. And the three of them just kind of sitting in Ben's office kind of made me laugh. But so Ben and Kat are kind of having this moment, and they're out drinking and kind of been talking all day. So Ben brings Kat back to his place, and they start talking about his like ex and like his love that died, and they talk about Ruby getting killed, and he saved Kat so he doesn't feel any worse about himself. You know, he's like, I feel terrible that I let my love die, you know, so if I was just gonna let you die too, you know. She's like, oh, so that's why you saved me? He goes, no, I saved you so I don't feel any worse. And he says, maybe we can be alone together, right? Because they're both just alone, and they're lonely, and they, you know, have loves that they can't be with, and they're dying, you know. So they have like some similarities with each other, and they're like, maybe we can just be alone together, and they hold hands, and it's like, oh. And if you guys know me, I'm a sucker for a love story, so I love this little scene. But as Lonnie is playing cards with Robbie and Janet, he tells them about being a prisoner of war when he was a soldier, when the Germans took them. And Robbie leans forward like, they did something to y'all, didn't they? You know, he doesn't necessarily say what, but he like points them in the direction of the doctor that was trying to like help them, but has been making them worse. Silvermane, all pissed off that the police chief didn't meet him for his meeting, he goes to see that the mayor and the police chief are having dinner together, and Silvermane sits down at the table, and Silvermane and the mayor compare dick sizes, and, you know, they're both talking shit to each other, and, you know, he goes, oh, let me introduce you to one of my associates, and Sandman walks up and smashes the table, and the mayor just kind of goes, oh, everything's fine, we're friends here, because there's like a big event going on, so he kind of like diffuses the situation, makes everybody go back to what they were doing, but everyone's kind of stunned because the table just got smashed in front of the mayor and the police chief and the mob boss Silvermane. But the mayor doesn't back down, and interestingly enough, you know, he's like, you know, holding strong, and he's like, you know, fuck you, dude, you're fucking a criminal. And Silvermane says, may the best man live, you know, not may the best man win, may the best man live, because one of us will be dying by the end of this bullshit. But so then at Ben's place, place, him and Kat are sitting there, and over the radio comes a report that there's a superpowered individual in the Diamond District. So Kat immediately thinks it's Flint, and they go off running, and Ben's like, I'm not going. But he really is going to suit up as the Spider to go deal with Flint. But when the Spider rushes over to the Diamond District to look for Flint, he ends up finding a man with electricity powers, who I originally was calling Electro, but it seems that this guy is like Megawatt or something. But either way, he's like this big fat guy that I know from something. Like he was a goofy character back in the day. I want to say like Sky High or something. I don't know. But I feel like I recognize this actor, but he's now an older man, has been acting for years, and he was really eating up the dialogue because his like Megawatt character was like really theatrical, but like was also had electricity powers, so he's kind of, you know, electrocuting Spider-Man and kind of beating his ass, you know, and Spider-Man struggles at first, but, you know, he's been rusty, he hasn't fought in 5 years, but one of the women in the crowd's like, nah, he's still got it, and he ends up beating Megawatt. But as he, like, you know, saves the day, and he's, like, hurt, and he's kind of, like, winded, and he's struggling after this win, and the mayor runs in to say, oh, the Spider and I have teamed up to save the city, and he, like, makes a big show of this for all the cameras and the crowd that's been gathered around this, you know, and he's fighting him on, like, 6th Ave or something, the Diamond District, so it's like, you know, almost like a fight would break up on Rodeo Drive in LA. But Ben goes home after getting his ass pretty thoroughly kicked from Megawatt. And as he gets back, he kind of like puts down the case with the Spider costume in it, and he kind of does this like cracking of all of his bones in his body that is almost very arachnid in the way he does it. And he just, being Nicolas Cage and having his Nicolas Cage-y moments where he's very quirky and whatnot. But like, you know, he cracks all of his bones to get like comfortable, and he like goes to sit down in his chair to rest, and a knock at the door comes, and he's like, oh God, what? All right. So he goes, and it's Kat, and she's come back, you know, because she saw the Spider fighting, and they made like awkward eye contact, and she was like, so she comes back to Ben's apartment, and she opens the window, and she's smoking a cigarette, and she goes, am I right? And he goes, right about what? And she has figured out that Ben is the Spider, but the only way to figure out for sure is to test the theory, so she jumps out of the window backwards and would just splat to her death if he wasn't the Spider, but she was right, and Ben saves her and brings her back up, and they kiss, and that's credits on episode 4, and I was like, dude, for the halfway point of the season, I am in love with this show. It's got love, it's got romance, it's got drama, it's got fucking superheroes, it's got noir vibes, it can be watched in black and white or color, you know, I really like what's going on so far. But that then leads us into episode 5, titled Betrayal. And we see Kat and Ben, after their kiss, they're like at a diner, and they're still, you know, together. And as Ben is talking to Kat, we get to see some of his, you know, the Spider's origins, and with Ben back in the war. And he was a sergeant in the war, and he was there freeing prisoners, and almost gets shot himself while he's freeing one of these prisoners. And we see that it was like Flint was in one of these cells, and he was one of these guys that he was freeing. But Ben goes further into this compound to find more soldiers getting experimented on by the Germans, and they're all hooked up to like these different, like one of them's like a spider, one of them's getting hooked up to a snake, one of them's hooked up to a praying mantis. I was like, ugh, what are all these guys, and what are these things that they're doing to him? And he sees one of them is hooked up to a tarantula, and he walks up, he's like, hey, you alright, buddy? And he sees like a full man that is a man spider, and he's like half, you know, he's almost two-faced, but half of his face looked normal, and the rest of it had like spider eyes. And then he pulled like the sheet off of him, and his whole body had like a spider sack and like 8 legs, like, ugh, God, freaking disgusting. And it bites Ben, and this is how Ben gets his spider powers. But, you know, one of his guys shoots him, and he's like, holy shit, you know, like, this is fucking crazy, are you alright? But so Ben was the one who freed Addison and Lonnie and Flint and all of these other superpowered prisoner of wars that we've seen so far in the show, and it seems Ben was the one who freed them, but he wasn't one of the guys getting experimented on. He just got bit by that man spider. So damn, not necessarily a spider bite, but not necessarily not a spider bite either. So yeah, interesting how it like attacks Ben's like psyche and makes him turn into the man spider, you know, and he definitely struggles at first. But we cut back to Robbie, and he's at the Bugle, and he gets his job in his desk back with this new story, with the Electro story, and he's got pictures of this fight between Electro or Megawatt and the Spider. But we see when he gets his new desk that the plaque, like the little name plaque, says Joe Robertson. So I didn't know his first name was Joe, but it makes better sense than Robbie Robertson, right? Like people call him Robbie because of the last name Robertson. So his name is Joe Robbie Robertson. And I was like, oh, interesting. Joe. I'm still going to call him Robbie, but still. Joe Robinson, if you didn't know. But we then see Flint comes to Lonnie to recruit him to come work for Silvermane. And at first Lonnie doesn't want to, and he's like, you know, I'm not ever going to work for another white man that mistreats me. And he goes, nah, man, Silvermane's loyal, and he looks out after his own. He goes, even with me looking like this, he took me in. So, you know, even with Lonnie and his tombstone powers, he'll be safe with Sandman and Silvermane, at least as, you know, some muscle for Silvermane. Robbie, being the good little reporter he is, goes to investigate the doctor that Lonnie told him about, and, you know, the doctor that's been experimenting on these guys. And as he's, like, talking to her, he, like, you know, kind of offends her, and he's distracting her, though, while Ben sneaks into her office to steal files. And the doctor, like, comes back while Ben's in there, so he's got to, like, web the files out the windows. And then he's, like, sitting there acting like a crazy person. He goes, second floor, second floor, second floor, you don't like me very much. And they're like, I think I know that guy. That's the guy that saved us. And she's like, go after him. And, you know, we'll see more of Ogden going after him and being the, you know, assistant to this doctor. But also Ogden has some interesting story for himself. We then cut over to Tombstone and Sandman as they beat up the cops that are holding Electro, and Silvermane comes in and recruits Electro, or Megawatt, or whatever you want to call this electric-powered loser. But either way, they recruit him onto the team, and he's quite the talker, and he's got so much to say. And honestly, every scene with this Megawatt character is so funny and so awesome. But he's such a weird little quirky character, because as he gets freed, he walks over to one of the guys and kisses him and electrocutes him to death through this kiss, and then he goes, and scene, right? So he like wants to be like a Broadway star or whatnot, and even Silvermane's like, that was fucking weird, you know? But Silvermane then calls for Ben, and he tells Ben to warn the Spider to stay out of his fight with the mayor. Wouldn't want to see his nose getting in a place that he's not supposed to be. And as Ben's leaving, Flint comes up to him and tells him that he knows that he framed Winston, and that he knows what he did was to save Kat. So he's gonna let him slide this time, but not in the future, not again, you know? So he's gonna keep the secret for Kat because he loves her, but, you know, he's like on to Ben and what they've been up to. But Ben goes to Kat and tells her that, like, Flint's onto him, and she's like, we're chasing ghosts, you know, my Ruby's gone, your Flint is past saving, we should just get out of here, go to Santorini, Greece, like you wanted to, right? You know, and she agrees to go, and they kiss. So, like, you know, she had the same type of plan to run away with Flint, now she's making plans to run away with Ben. I was like, this is gonna end well. And Kat is getting her bags ready when Lonnie tells her he's worried about Flint. When they're talking, Flint, like, elbows this, like, stage that's getting held up by this one beam, and, like, Lonnie catches it so that it doesn't crush her. But clearly Flint is not doing well, and he keeps getting more angry and more unhinged with his power as it keeps infecting him, you know. But Flint kind of storms out, and Lonnie looks at Kat like there's only one thing that could save him now, and that's the doctors that they were talking about. And Lonnie says that the doctor thinks Ben's DNA is more stable than theirs, and that could be the key to saving them all. But he doesn't know who the Spider is, and neither does the doctor. But Kat knows who the Spider is now, so Kat goes to the doctor and betrays, with, like, the title of the episode, Betrayal. Kat betrays Ben's secret identity and tells her that the Spider is Ben Reilly, and that's credits on episode 5. And I was just like, no, fuck, you screwed him. You screwed him. Your fault entirely. But then we jump into episode 6, titled Nightmare on a Gurney. And the doctor's assistant, Ogden, comes to try to convince Ben to help him, but he too has a mutation that is aging him in a dog's pace, right? So he's really in his 30s, but he looks like he's 80 years old. And Ben, like, does tell him that he is the Spider and shows him the mask. And he goes, I'm out of here, I'm leaving. And he goes to, like, show him the door, and he goes, I wish there was another way. And Ogden stabs him with, like, some sleeping medication in the hand and knocks out Ben. And when Ben wakes up, they have taken him to the doctor's lab, and she's trying to cure these men because she too lost her son from this, but her son is actually Ogden, and it's like, oh, interesting. So, like, her son is the guy who's now super old but is really supposed to be 30, but he looks older than her, and she's not a young woman. But this doctor, is trying to save these people with Ben's DNA, and she's not necessarily letting Ben be a willing participant in this, and he's locked up on the gurney, and he's like, I will kill you if you don't unlock me. And she goes, that's precisely why you're locked up. But then we see Ben having flashbacks of when the army originally did tests on him right after he was bit. He's like, this isn't gonna work. And she goes, I know, I've studied these army's tests, but I'm doing something different, And, like, we seeing the flashbacks of poor Ben and him being, like, fully, like, the arachnid DNA is, like, infecting him, and he's like, what is happening to me? Like, the full Nicolas Cage-isms during these flashbacks are fucking tremendous. But we see that the doctor's son is actually Ogden, and then Ben finds out that Kat was the one who gave him up, and told them his identity, but it's only to save Flint, but then Ben passes out. But as Ben's out cold, she uses his DNA to make a cure for Ogden, and he turns back into the younger man, and Freckles, the guy who was in the military with these guys and was saved by Ben originally. And then Ben, is able to get some strength back, and he busts out of his restraints, and he's got, like, a big old cut on his ribs because this woman was cutting him open and whatnot. Just really fucked. But either way, he's being really Nicolas Cagey as he's walking down this hall, and it's so funny. He's in, like, a hospital gown type of thing, and he, like, webs the wall to help himself stand up, and then webs the ceiling, and he kind of, like, dangles for a moment, and he's like, all right, I'm good, I'm standing. But the doctor sees that, he's escaped, so she sends Ogden to kill him, and he has a gun, but he doesn't kill him, and he instead helps him because he saved his life back in the day, and he feels like he owes Ben. So he helps Ben get out of there, but Silvermane arrives because Robbie has now published the location of the lab in the paper, so now everyone knows where this lab is. So Silvermane and his guys rush into this laboratory, and the doctor takes them to her lab where there's more mutated freaks in boxes, and Megawatt starts to fight Ogden, and Ogden shoots him, but he seems like he's gonna be okay. The Megawatt guy, he kind of ate that bullet, didn't necessarily need to go to the hospital or anything. But, then also Lonnie jumped in front of him to protect him from any more bullets. This scene ends in Megawatt starting a fire in this lab as Ogden and the doc are, like, knocked out, so they seemingly burn to death inside of this lab. But Ben was able to escape with the antidote, and maybe to save Flint so he and Kat can be happy, and and selfishly he will let Kat be happy instead of being happy himself. And that's credits on episode 6, which then takes us into episode 7, titles Nobody's Hero. But so Silvermane's sitting at his club, and he tells Kat that he only exists for the fight, and that he's only survived all these years because he's looking for the fight, and he's like, yeah, what keeps me going, he's a very interesting character, but he's, definitely flawed, and you can feel where he's coming from in certain senses. But, he sends out his boys and the new powered individuals to cause chaos in the streets, and Silvermane looks at Kat, who seems to be going through it, but, maybe feeling bad for betraying Ben. But Silvermane says, you love it, I know you do. And Brendan Gleeson as Silvermane is just eating up all the dialogue, and he's just been an absolute joy to watch throughout this show. But we see Sandman and Electro, they go and rob the mayor's campaign fund, and they take all of his money, and this is going to piss off the mayor. But then we cut over to Kat as she comes looking for Ben, but he's at a bar getting drunk. When a bunch of punks come into this bar, and they're talking about the spider being a pussy, and he's like, well, what if the spider was just a normal guy? And all these guys laugh at him, and, Ben is hammered, and it's broad daylight. He, like, walks outside, puts on the spider mask, and walks back in. And this scene is really funny when Ben just, like, walks in with the spider mask all hammered and beats these guys up. And, like, in the scene, he's going, web, 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 you know, like, and it was killing me because I just was picturing the like Spider-Man PlayStation video game, and it's like R1 and makes Spider-Man shoot the web, but normally in my head I would go thwip, 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 you know, like, or like you're swinging through the city and you're like thwip, 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 right? Like it's real quick. But now every time I play that game, I'm going to be picturing Nicolas Cage in my head going web, 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 you know, like, oh god. Or even like Tobey Maguire, web, up and away, web, fly, Shazam, go, 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 web, go. Oh god, like there was really a lot of Ben Reilly and the energy that Nicolas Cage was bringing that was giving me Tobey Maguire vibes. So now I have a pie in the sky dream to see Sam Raimi direct a Spider-Noir film, and I think that could be awesome. Make it rated R, send it, fucking send it. But I love the little clip of this scene, and how it ends kills me.
For today.
I can hear the sound of violin. Sway me smooth, sway me
Right, like only Nicolas Cage at the end of that scene where like, when the marimba music starts to play, makes me swing, makes me say, you know, like it starts like just this music in the background and he's just going web, 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 web. And then he ends by going ha cha ha ha, you know, or like he goes ha 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 cha cha. You know, like he claps and does this like weird goofy hand thing from the, oh, that was in the trailers. It was so worth it that I had to wait till episode 7 to see that. So worth it. One of my favorite scenes in the entire show, and Nicolas Cage is just so fucking funny. But so Robbie comes to the bar to pull Ben out of his drunken stupor and bring him back to the shop and bring him back to action. And we see Kat and Flint talk about their love for each other, but he's pissed that she ran off with Ben right at the first sign that he was dead and he was gone. And he won't tell Silvermane what she did, but he won't be able to protect her when he's dead, you know, so he's warning her, if anything, like, hey, I'm gonna die soon and then I won't be able to protect you. Silvermane's a smart guy, don't fuck up, you know, like, and it's sad because I really wanted to see like Flint and Kat be all happily ever after with each other, but it seems Flint's too much of a Sandman. But so now I want to see Kat and Ben happy together, but she just betrayed him. I don't know if that's gonna work out either. But so Ben wants to take the antidote because he doesn't want to be the Spider anymore, and you know, with no power comes no responsibility. You know, a little bit of a flip on the normal Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility, is the normal Uncle Ben saying, but no, Ben Reilly, he doesn't want no power because he doesn't want no responsibility. But just as he says this, the radio broadcast overhears the police scanners, and it comes through saying that Lonnie is up to something in Harlem. So Robbie tries to go to talk to him first, but the Spider swings in and there's a fight between him and Tombstone. And Tombstone, it looks like he's beating the hell out of Spider-Man and he's about to smash the Spider, and you know, maybe it's because he's a little drunk and whatnot, but either way, he's about to smash the Spider when Robbie jabs him in the eye, right, because his Tombstone skin, the needle wouldn't go through at first, so Robbie stabs him in the eye with the antidote, and I thought this would have blinded him for sure, but no, it looks like it just cures Tombstone, and he doesn't have his diamond hard skin anymore, or whatever, Tombstone hard skin, and the cops run in to arrest Lonnie, but the Spider stops them and pulls all the cops off of them, and they all jump into a car with Robbie and Lonnie, and they toss the Spider in the back seat, and then they rush out of there like a couple of criminals. Robbie takes the Spider back to his place to rest, and friggin' Nicolas Cage is like sleeping in the mask, and he's like in Robbie's bed, he's like, where am I? He's talking to himself in his sleep and whatnot. But so Lonnie and Robbie make amends because Robbie got them out of there, and he's like, you know, wasn't trying to make Lonnie out to be a monster. That wasn't what Robbie ever wanted, you know. So Robbie, at the end of the day, is a good guy. He's protecting Lonnie here, and him and Robbie make amends, and they part ways. And Lonnie says he might take his moms to Niagara Falls, but it seems like he's going to walk off into the sunlight type of thing and not get arrested. And he got cured as well, so he doesn't have the tombstone power anymore. So it looks like he's going to survive, and you know, he's going to take off with his moms, maybe to go see Niagara Falls. Interesting. But then we end this episode with a nice crazy parallel shot of the mayor and Silvermane, right? So it's like 2 shots above, and then it's like a comic panel with 2 panels and then a wide panel underneath, and the wide panel is just Ben as the Spider asleep in Robbie's bed. But then the 2 parallel shots, we see the mayor and Silvermane finding out Lonnie was cured from this, you know, antidote, and they need to find the Spider, and both of them say, "Find me Ben Reilly," and that's where the credits roll on episode 7. And I was just like, ooh, the penultimate episode left on another great cliffhanger. Could have been a week-to-week show once again, but heading us into the final episode of this season 1 with episode 8 titled "The Man in the Mask." And Silvermane tells Kat a story of his growing up and tells her never to be satisfied. And he goes, "That's what I want for you, never to be satisfied. Never take what somebody's willing to give you when you want more." And he really does love Kat, but he is just a using, conniving mob boss, you know what I mean? Like, he's just saying to her what he wants because he doesn't give a shit what she wants, you know what I mean? But if she wants her to be more like him and just take what she wants and not ask for it, you know? But so Kat calls Janet because she's worried about the Spider and whatnot. And she calls Janet and they meet up. And Janet slaps Kat once for Ben and then slaps her again for herself. But Kat tells Janet that if she could get the antidote to her, that she can get close enough to Flint and Megawatt and she can do it without raising suspicion. So, you know, not a bad plan, but also they're like, is she trying to trade on us again? We're not sure. She, you know, she just gave up Ben a couple episodes to the doctor, you know, so Janet doesn't necessarily trust her, and I don't think many people would at this point. But so Janet goes back to the office and she gets a call from Robbie that he has the Spider at his place. So she goes over to Robbie's place, but Silvermane's guys are following her, and she leads them directly to Robbie's place where they have Ben. But as, like, you know, she's walking away, you know, they're in the back seat, and Megawatt's like, that's somebody in a hurry to go meet somebody, you know, and the intro plays. And just, you know, for the sake of talking about it, the intro slapped pretty damn hard, but it just confused me that the intro was in black and white every time, no matter what, and I was forced to watch this in color, which was one of the main reasons why I delayed this, right? Because I was only able to watch this show in black and white on my Apple TV setup in my living room, which is a newer setup and a newer TV. But like, I have a pretty nice setup in my room, but it is an older setup, right? Like, it's not brand new from the last couple years. So for some reason, this show got listed as you can watch it in black and white and color. And like, when I go to watch it on my living room TV, you hit play and it gives you which option would you like to watch. But for whatever reason, that's not supported on my TV in my room. So I was forced to watch this whole show in color, and I think when I watch this with my roommate, I'm going to go back through and watch it in black and white down in the living room TV. But either way, you know, it just was kind of annoying that this banger of an intro could be in black and white. So clearly my TV is capable of the black and white, but for whatever reason, the Amazon Prime app on my TV wouldn't let me watch it in black and white in my room, which is just stupid. But we cut back from that banger of an intro to see that Ben blackmails $2,000 out of Silvermane for, you know, him calling the Spider. And he's like, I would have done it for $500, and he goes, I would have paid the $10,000, you know, like, so it was just a funny little scene with him being like, what's a man to do? You want my money? I could go shop this to the mayor. I think there's deep pockets on both sides. And he's like, just call the Spider. But, you know, clearly, you know, for him to call the Spider, he's sitting there in the room. So Ben calls the Spider, but it's Janet and Robbie on the other end of the line, and Robbie is like pretending to be the Spider and doing his best impersonation of Nick Cage, which is just hilarious. But Megawatt finally puts together where he knows Ben from. And he puts together that he was the guy who saved them from the camp. And Silvermane puts together that he's like, oh, Ben Reilly must have been the Spider then. If he is the Spider's best friend, he was at that camp where all you guys got powers. Ah, Ben Reilly must be the Spider. And Silvermane thinks he's being slick, and he's like, oh, well, he goes, I'll shoot Cat right here, because the Spider's not going to sit by and just watch me kill this innocent woman. And he's like, well, you know, that would be certainly fucked up, you know, because what if I'm not the Spider, and I'm just the private investigator that you hired, and you just kill this woman for nothing, you know? And it's honestly a funny scene because, you know, he's like trying to save Cat, but the webs aren't working in his hands. So even if he was the Spider and he wanted to save Cat, he's like, webs aren't working, so he couldn't in this moment even if he wanted to. So it gets like real tense. You're like, uh-oh, oh god, is Silvermane about to shoot Cat in the head and kill her right here? But just as like this tension gets at its highest point, Robbie comes in dressed as the Spider, and Lamorne Morris is in the suit and doing his best Nicolas Cage, and it's hilarious, this whole scene, because you're like, oh, well, Ben is clearly the Spider, and he is now sitting there talking to the Spider, and he's like trying to say shit to Robbie, like in code, being like, no, just take the money, give him the antidote and go. This is pretty easy. Don't try to be a hero, because you aren't using your webs, and you're probably still hurt from your last fight. No? Fuck off, Robbie. But Robbie didn't bring the antidotes on him as the Spider, and Silvermane's guys grab Janet outside and, you know, bring her in, and she had the 2 antidotes on her, and it's just like, uh-oh. But so Megawatt grabs the antidote and stabs Robbie with one, and he's like, what? We're gonna cure him to see if it fucking works? He goes, maybe we'll just smash the other 2, right? Because he doesn't want to be cured, and he goes, Flint might want to be, but like he wants him and Flint to be the superpowered individuals and take over. He's like, look, it's Silvermane. He's just an old man. Come on, we got the power. Let's do it, you know? And, you know, for a second I was almost like, uh-oh, Megawatt's gonna fucking do this. He's gonna smash those 2 antidotes and all's gonna be lost. But so Megawatt walks up and unmasks Robbie, and they see that it's just the reporter. But Ben, just at this moment, gets his webs back, and he webs the mask and like puts it into his pocket, and they're like, oh wait, what the fuck? But so Ben starts to fight back, and he's webbing them and making their heads smash into tables, and he goes and jumps into the suit, right? So he must just strip the suit right off of Robbie real quick, and he leaps up on the table as the Spider, you know, talking shit, quipping. And as this fight ensues, Silvermane decides to beat it out the back door, and Cat follows Silvermane with a gun. Uh-oh. And as the Spider and Megawatt and Sandman are all fighting, it spills out onto the street, and then we cut back to Cat, and she is talking to Silvermane, and they're like, you know, getting this tense moment, and Cat shoots Silvermane and kills him, and he's like, truth is, love, I'm happy it's you, my love. And he like falls and dies, and you're like, ooh, God, Brendan Gleeson, I would have wanted to see more of him in season 2, but this is a good ending for him either way, that there's actual consequences for his actions, and Kat actually has character growth, and she's like, you know, loves these 2 characters, but she also has to get out from underneath the thumb of Silvermane, and why send him to prison when he could just come out, you know? Kill him. Only way to truly stop him, you know? But it seems Megawatt has gotten too powerful, and it looks like he has the Spider beat, but Kat comes out with a gun, and she's gonna shoot Megawatt, and he's like, I don't think you got the balls to pull the trigger, and she does, but she's out of bullets, and he zaps her, which pisses off Flint. So Flint like runs over to check on her. But then we get Megawatt versus Sandman. But this fight between Megawatt and Sandman gives Ben enough time to recover, and he webs the back of Megawatt, and he's like trying to electrocute him through the webs, but he swings him, and he throws Megawatt in front of a train, and he, you know, splats on front of a train, and the crowd all around like stops for a moment and then all applauds this murder. I was like, oh, cool. They're all cool with this murder. Great, yeah. Ben walks over to Kat and gives her the last antidote for Flint so that they can live happily ever after. And he walks away through the crowd as everyone's cheering, and he has a torn spider mask, and he just looks so good. But then we cut to see Kat and Flint and Ben are the only one who attends Silvermane's funeral. And Flint has taken the cure, and he looks much better. And Ben's still kind of butthurt at Kat, you know, and as he talks to her, he's like still kind of butthurt at her betraying him, you know, and and giving up his name as the Spider to the Doctor, and also like, you know, saying she was gonna run away with him, but really never did, and she wants to fall in love with Flint now. And so, you know, Ben's a little butthurt. I sensed from this, and for her betraying him, and he's still not quite over it. So maybe they'll get over this in the next season, or maybe this will be the last we see of Kat and Flint. But just to end it out, we see that the mayor won a second term as the mayor, and Ben added Janet's name, her last name Ruiz, to the door, and as she is also a better private eye than he ever could be. So instead of just being Riley Investigations, it's now Riley and Ruiz Investigations, and they get a call, and he sets the meeting for 2 o'clock, and she's like, why 2? And he goes, well, I really want a hot dog, and I heard Robbie's buying. He's like, wait, what? And we hear that Robbie now has his own newspaper, and he goes, it pays even less than the Bugle. He goes, either way, you owe me a hot dog. And Janet's like, what, you don't want to buy me a hot dog? So the three of them walk out the door to go get some hot dogs, and Ben webs his hat to his hand and shuts the door, and that's credits on season 1. And I was just like, yeah, so it seems at the end there, whatever that call was in that meeting at 2 could set up the second season, and they clearly had some ideas for a second season, where in that next season, Janet and Nicolas Cage will both be private eyes. Robbie's gonna have his own newspaper. What will that be? I'm not sure, but either way, you know, like, it seems like they had some decent ideas for a season 2, and I really genuinely see through that whole season, I do not see why that show could not have been a weekly television, and it would have survived, I think, pretty damn well for weekly television. And sure, right now it would have been going up against X-Men 97 and like House of the Dragon, but I'll tell you what, as somebody that's watching those other shows, this was a great change of pace from those other 2 shows where they're much more serious in, like, you know, maybe animation, but like, this is a great noir show. It's a great Spider-Man show. It's a great Nicolas Cage show. And it's a great just like detective show. Like, great cast. Brendan Gleeson, Silvermane crushed it. Sandman, Lonnie Lincoln, Megawatt all crushed it. Even Addison, even though he didn't have a whole lot of screen time at the beginning of the series, was great. Kat was great. Janet was great. Robbie was great. Of course, Nicolas Cage was great. I am totally here for this, and I want to see more of this character and more of Nicolas Cage as this character. And maybe they could do a movie, like I was saying. Maybe they get a Sam Raimi and they make a rated R Spider-Noir movie. I think genuinely this world that they were building out here is fascinating, but maybe it just needs a little bit more of a budget. But if not, maybe just a bigger budget season 2, and maybe not much of a bigger budget, but still a little bit more for them to do more stuff in season 2. I think genuinely I would enjoy a season 2, and I think it's just a really well done show that I don't think enough people are watching. And, you know, it's streaming now on Amazon Prime. If you have watched this whole show and you made it this far into the video, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And if you didn't watch the show and you just got all the cliff notes from me, I still highly recommend for you guys, go check out this show in color. It was a beautiful show, even though it was a noir show. It does feel a little odd that I didn't watch it in black and white, but the color was so well done that I didn't mind watching it in color. You know, and it brought so much vivid detail to that color. So I was like, oh my god, and all of the costumes really were so vibrant, and they probably were that vibrant so that they would look good in black and white, but then in color they looked phenomenal. So I don't know, I think I will watch this in black and white when my roommate wants to come around to watching this. But so far, man, I am really impressed with what I saw from season 1, and if they did a season 2, I would watch it. I would just recommend to them doing weekly television. It's much more fun to watch, and I think their viewership numbers would have been way more than the binge audience, you know. And say, you know, some binge people either way, say you do 6 weeks of this show and the binge people haven't gotten around to it, by week 7 they'll binge all 7 episodes, and then they'll be at the water cooler for that last week talking to everybody at work, being like, oh yeah, I'm on episode 7 too, I've been watching the show just like everybody else, you know, like, and then by the finale, everyone's talking about it because they spent 8 weeks watching the show, and it's like spread by word of mouth, and you know, it's I think just weekly television is the way to go, and binge drops are just not for me, you know. But comment below your thoughts about this show, and if you watched it in color or in black and white, and which one you liked better. Overall for this show, I think it's like a 3.5 out of 5 stars for me, like a 7 out of 10. But if I had to give it a true out of 10 score, it's probably like a 7.7. Like, I genuinely liked it, and this is a pretty high 7 out of 10 stars for me. So yeah, 7.7 out of 10, about 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. I liked this show. I thought it was good, and I hope you guys appreciated this breakdown of this show. If you want to check out some of my other TV show breakdowns, currently we're doing House of the Dragon Season 3, and those breakdowns have been coming out weekly on the channel. And also there was a breakdown last week for X-Men 97 Season 2, and the first 3 episodes for that dropped, and episode 4 actually dropped today. So there should be a breakdown for that coming tomorrow, so stay tuned, y'all. Once again, my name's Big Cam. Thank you guys for joining me this far into the video. And if you have made it this far into the video and you would like to comment below your thoughts about Spider-Noir, or you can send them to my other social medias, links for those down in the description below. And if you would like to support the channel further, the best way of doing that is dropping a like on this video, commenting down below, subscribing if you haven't already, and hitting that bell so you don't miss future Comically Boston breakdown episodes with your host Big Cam. That's me, and I'll see you gorgeous folks in the next episode. Peace!